in there. Later on, I learned about high yield savings accounts and checking accounts. And I'm like, all right, let's get some of that up in here too. And then I find myself present day between like this entire financial system I built to operate my household and all of my goals. It works, but there's so many inefficiencies because it's like we're just tacking things on as we go along and we're not recognizing the pattern we're setting. That like now that you've set this automatic thing up, it's going to affect this other thing maybe that you didn't even think about. And do you know how to identify it? Or will it be many months later after the damage is done when you catch it? And I'm in the process personally of like destroying our budget and rebuilding it for that purpose. Cause I'm like, it's not too big. It's like tacked on over and over and over. And I feel like that's what most of these policies and like are just our country, our system, the industry have become is as technology advances and society advances and human needs evolve, they're just throwing stuff on top and causing stuff underneath it to start getting crushed. And nobody really cares because you're looking at the shiny thing up top. And then suddenly the bottom falls out and we're all surprised.
Right. Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know. It's easy to get it's easy to get frustrated with how things work, but then at the same time, it's difficult to come up with solutions. And so, like you said, scrapping everything in your personal situation is viable, but obviously we can't do that on a grand scale for everyone in our financial system, obviously in the country. So I really do not envy our policymakers' jobs. I won't comment on how well I think they do, but I will just say that I don't envy their job because I don't have the solutions. I mean, I really don't, and so I don't want to come from a place where I'm talking about the issues like I have the golden ticket because I don't. I just know how to help people navigate, in their personal lives, navigate the inefficiency of the system that we live in, right? So it's one of those things where, okay, so we obviously have some things that we aren't happy with in our financial system, but there are ways to deal with it. So, for example, one of the things that I really tell people, uh, you know, which is just free advice for anybody that meets with me if they have student loans, is hey, if you've got a job, you've got income, and while the interest on your student loans are being deferred right now, even if you're one of those that hopes and crosses your fingers that it's going to be forgiven, just keep paying it. Just keep paying those payments um, while the interest is deferred because it's gonna be much more productive. Pay off more principal that way. So although we live in a system that has many flaws, there are ways to help yourself through the through time. So, what was another one? I know there was student loans wasn't just it. What was another one that you kind of felt like grind your gears about how our financial system works?
I got it. I help
Was it
yourself
taxes?
law. Yes. So
Okay.
I okay, I filed my taxes a couple weeks ago. And first off, I won't go in my whole opinion about the housing industry because I do make my livelihood off of it. But at the same time, housing should be one of those basic needs, those basic rights that you should be entitled to. But it's so expensive. And I remember even before I really got into the industry, when I was a lot younger, I would sit back and watch, and everybody's like, well, I bought this house. And every house has to be an investment, by the way, all of them. So you buy this house, and it's supposed to go up in value endlessly. Every year, it's supposed to be worth more than it was last year, so that you can sell it for bukus of money when you retire. But wages never keep up with that. And so my mind was like, what happens next when suddenly your house is worth so much that nobody can ever afford to buy it? Like, what's the point? Anyway, rental income and rental houses and rental properties, that's an area of taxes that bugs me, but there's a second layer to it. So we filed our taxes this year, and I'm not going to pretend I know what happened, but we went to our tax person, and I'm like, all right, cool. Here is the income we produced. Here's the expenses we had, like the repairs we had to make, the mileage driving back and forth, that kind of stuff. And I can do two plus two. Like I wasn't a math scholar by any measure, but I can do some two plus two and recognize like, okay, I probably earned about this much in income once you subtract the expenses. But when it was written out on paper and the tax codes were applied to it, suddenly I earned almost nothing. And that is weird because that means you're dropping your taxable income, which means you're paying less taxes. And that's a whole conversation that, like, the people who rent the houses I live in, I'm going to be totally black and white. They pay me a profit. I make more than I actually pay on the house. And then because I have the ability to do that, I then get to save more money on my taxes than they do, which is just messed up. But that's not even my actual complaint. My complaint with the tax system is, for the most part, in most cases, like if you're a W 2 employee, you have a job, direct deposit, payroll, like biweekly, that kind of vibe, everybody knows what you earn. Like your employer knows it. They report it all the time. They pay taxes on you constantly throughout the year, which means the IRS knows. And then you get the shiny piece of paper at the end of the year saying, congratulations, here's how much money you earned this tax year. Fantastic. File it with us. You go somewhere or you do it yourself and you get it filed. And the IRS like looks at your filing, looks at what they have on record, compares it to your filing and says, yep, you're fine, you're good. Rubber stamp, approved, moved on. Or anywhere in the next couple of years, they can go back and say, well, what we had down was something different. You're going to have to prove to us why yours is right. And it bugs me because I'm like, they should know. Like, I understand if you're self-employed, you're doing stuff under the table. Like, I get that because you can't see everything, but the majority of people in the United States work for companies. And so this stuff is out there. Why is there not a truly simpler way to report your income taxes to the federal government? Because they already know it. I just don't get that.
Right. I don't get it either, and that's another part of our financial system that I think is just so not efficient. And we always before we start recording have a little bit of conjecture about getting started thinking about topics. And I know you mentioned something about the lobbying that takes place in our country, and that really I think plays a role in some of the inefficiencies that we see in our financial system. And I think that's one area where you could pretty confidently say that's been affected by lobbying and how the tax system works. But I will say that one thing that really kind of boggles my mind about taxes is the whole W-4 system where you tell your employer how much to withhold, blah, blah, blah. How easy it is for someone to file that incorrectly and have either way too low, too small of an amount of money withheld from their paychecks every pay period for taxes, so they end up owing a lot at the end of the year, or when they overly estimate how much they should have withheld from their paychecks and have some huge return at the end of the year. That it doesn't make sense to me why you would want to be in either one of those situations. And I definitely have heard clients talk about how in the past they have purposefully over estimated on their W-4 so that they knew they would get a return at the end of the year or at the beginning of the next year. And that, to me, the IRS is not paying you interest on your money that you overpay them. And they don't tell you that, obviously. So it's like, that's just a free loan to the IRS, throughout the year. And to me, it's like, I would not want to do that. I would want to hold on to my money if I earned it. So it's little things like that. There's a lot of inefficiencies there. So, I mean, if you're a W-2 employee, one of the big things that's, it's important is if you're paying more than $1,000 in taxes in a tax bill every year, or receiving more than $1,000 in a tax return as a W-2 employee, there's something wrong with your withholding. So
I
take a
forgot
look at
about
that.
that.
Yeah. So you got to take a look at that.
So you said the W-4 form, and my mind was like W-4, W-4, going through it in my head. That is the one, like, I know it best when you start a job and you're sitting there in orientation and they're
that's the
throwing,
one.
yes, everything at you. And then, by the way, like, here, fill out this form, pick your 0 and your 1 and whatever you want. and then this will affect your pay going on forward. And
Yep.
I feel like there is no, like, is there a right way to do it? 100% is. Does anybody really know unless you have the formal education and training? No.
Right. So yeah, that's just it's really interesting to see because I mean I've had clients that had their withholding set up so strangely that based on like a tax projection, they were looking that like they were going to get like over $5,000 in a tax return. It's like, listen,
Mm-hmm.
listen, this is not okay. You need to get a W-4 from your employer and resubmit that because you don't need to be giving the IRS $5,000 throughout the year for them to hold on to. It's not a savings account. You don't loan them the money. That's not how this works. So, getting a huge return a lot of the times just means that you've overpaid in taxes throughout the year. And so I think that's just, the inefficiencies in that system, obviously, like I feel like I'm complaining again without a solution. But, it's frustrating. And, as someone that works in the industry, the financial services industry, we run into people all the time that have been negatively impacted by the inefficiencies that we see every day. It gives us a great opportunity to add value to our offerings and service by helping people deal with those types of issues, which I love doing and I'm happy to do. But it is at the same time very frustrating because you see people truly that negatively impacted by these types of things.
Yeah. Like, I wish I didn't have to teach this stuff, to be honest. I wish that people just knew.
Right.
I got one last one that's gonna grind your gears. I know it. I wrote it down. I'm like, this is gonna get you.
What's that?
401ks.
Yeah, I
I
already know
so
whatever it is. Whatever you're going to say, I already know it. It is.
my original gripe, like my personal gripe when I first realized why is it the way it is like the 401k first off, has been around since like the 70s. It's not this thing that's always been here. So the amount of people who have actually saved up in their entire lifetime and retired on one isn't a very high percentage. But the 401k exists. And in tandem, now companies don't pay you pensions anymore. And a lot of people don't recognize that if you're not actively saving for your retirement, what you're going to do when you get to retirement, you're going to be broke, and not just like cute broke like high school, broke as in how are you going to fund keeping a roof over your head, medicine to keep you healthy, food, things like that. But to not be so doom and gloom, rollovers and that whole conversation. So I first off, I didn't know much about 401ks when I got my first one. It was just kind of like, we're going to take money out, it's going to go in your account, and it's going to be great. And I said, okay, sure. And as I learned a little bit more, I started to kind of play around, make sure I was getting like the employer match, that kind of general advice you get. And then I left my job. And for the first time, I had the decision of like, they tell you in your exit interview that you can roll your 401k over, you can withdraw it and take it home with you and put it in your own personal money. You can leave it here, which isn't always the case, depends on your employer. But I knew enough at that point to say, all right, cool. I'm going to go ahead and move this on over so we can leave it in its little 401k bucket and it can keep doing its 401k thing. But for every one person I know who's done that, I can name at least five off the top of my head who took the money out and didn't recognize what they were doing, like from a tax liability standpoint, from a growth
Yeah.
standpoint, from a future planning standpoint. Nobody tells you these things. And I just can't stand it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just for the information of our listeners, yeah, if you take a premature distribution from your retirement accounts, whether it's an IRA, simple IRA, SEP, 401k, whatever it is, if you take a premature distribution, which means before you are of the age of 59 and a half, you're going to pay a 10% penalty on the distribution. And if it's your whole account, you'll pay a 10% penalty on the whole account. And then you will pay income taxes at your current income tax rate. So that's pretty significant. Um, if you're in the 20% tax bracket and you have a 10% penalty on as well, you're looking at 30% of your distribution being taken away, given to the government. I mean, that's big. That's huge. Especially considering the fact that you're giving up compounding interest and growth and everything moving forward. the opportunity cost